This video stems from a post that Hunterman put up in my group, uh, uh, along the lines of problems that conditioners have, troubleshooting conditioning. Uh, the way I see it, in my own case and other people's cases, the most problems or the problem point in a keep for people has been the last week. Now, I wasn't as much of a fixer as I was a preventer, meaning things can go wrong, you have to adjust. But it was more important to me to uh, try and make sure things didn't go wrong, kind of preventive maintenance type of thing, you know. During the keep, problems occur. Could be overworking a dog, could be not enough rest, could be a torn pad, could be a hurt joint, pulled muscle, all kinds of stuff. So that's what I mean about preventative maintenance. Try not to allow those things to happen. Have your dog dewormed, deloused, healthy, fit, on his feed. I put my dogs on their feed before I even started the keep feed. Some people call that a pre-keep. I pre-kept them long before I ever had them hooked up. I'm not saying pre-keep is bad. You should do it. If you're not doing much with your dog, they're going to need it. But regular exercise. And a lot of times the regular exercise in my yard, because they were so active, was just going out there and being around them. And that caused them to run around, move around, jump off their house, jump on their house, you know, uh, uh, being very vocal, just moving around a lot. Then I could play tug of war with some of them, do some flirt pole 2 or 3 days a week, do some road work. I didn't have a lot of dogs, and I had my family's help, so I could do all that. With a lot of dogs, it's very hard to do that. You know, even people, you bring your dog inside. Uh, Dogs that are raised inside, you can't do that with every dog. You can bring them in and out; they can get accustomed to being inside. But to have them raised inside, you're going to do that with 1 or 2 dogs at the most at a time. And it's good. It's good to bring them in. Teach them some manners. Teach them how to be inside without getting all crazy, being comfortable. They feel special being around the family. It's important for them to learn to be kenneled, as well as being outside in the yard amongst their peers and other dogs, young, old, and all that. But like I said, the problem I see is the last week. Now in my keep, and people always ask me, how do you know how much weight they're losing, or how do you figure out, you know, what their pit weight's going to be, as compared to the weight that they weigh at the time. I generally kept mine's between 2 and 4 pounds overweight, depending on their size. I didn't have them heavy. I had them fit. So the weight loss is incremental. It's very slight. So let's say you have a dog that's 4 pounds overweight. 8-week keep, the average weight loss is half a pound a week. Now, here's where people have a problem. How much do you feed? How much moisture do you give them? How much rest do you give them? You know, um, Basically, since I always gave them a certain amount of food, a kibble, a high performance kibble, and then I also used the supplements. All I did was increase the food that I'm giving them. The same food that's in the kibble, that's what I fed them during keep. I just gave them more of it, and I gave them real food. So basically, with the protein, I started off with half a pound, whatever it is you're using, chicken, fish, beef, whatever. Could be uh, um, game. Some people use deer meat, horse meat. You use any kind, goat, all kinds of stuff. The difference is the amounts of protein per gram that they provide. Some have higher levels, some have lower. So that's what you're adjusting. Know how much protein is in that animal protein and adjust it that way. Chicken is higher than beef, beef higher than fish, like that. So you just get a marked amount. And since I put them on their feed keep before I hooked them up, once I got them on that feed keep, they're gonna come to a certain weight. They're gonna be a certain weight over. That's standard. That shouldn't fluctuate. That shouldn't change. So that's where I get the 2 to 4 pounds. If you're 2 pounds over, then the over 8-week keep, then the average weight loss for me weekly was a quarter pound. It's not a lot, but the dogs don't have to be heavy. Some people say they do. They should, because they need that energy. That's true. But if the loss is incremental, then they don't have to be hog fat. They don't even have to be heavy. And my attitude was, I'm building them up. I'm not cutting them down. So where does that weight loss show up? When you're working your dogs during the week, you're going to see slight fluctuations. It shouldn't be a lot. It shouldn't be a lot. But where weight loss comes in, because they're burning calories as they're building muscle, is on the rest days. That's where you see the weight loss. If anybody has exercised, if you exercise or you work out, and you give yourself 1 day a week rest, or 2 days, or 3 days, after that rest day, you're going to notice, and this happens with my kids too, because they exercise all the time, they work out all the time. When they take a break of 1 or 2 days, they find themselves losing the weight. Whereas during the week, it wasn't that much. When they're working out, it's not that much. But they'll see a loss of a pound or a pound and a half after a couple of days of rest. Sometimes even 3 pounds. Because what happens is your muscles are burning the calories during that rest day. Muscles burn more calories than fat. So that's how I measured the average weight loss per week, was after the rest day. If the rest day is Friday, on Saturday, that's where I'm going to see that half a pound weight loss, if they're 4 pounds over during an 8-week keep. And it goes through that cycle every week. I'm losing that half pound, losing that half pound, losing that half pound, until it comes down to show day and they come on weight. So the rest allows your muscles to rebuild and grow, right? Your dog, what it looks like is and this is, it isn't a dramatic change, but what it looks like is they're ballooning up, they're getting bigger, their muscles are more cut, the sinews come out, but they're losing weight. And like I said, muscles burn calories. And it's during that rest period that the more calories are being burnt. So once you got that down pat, you're coming down to the last week. And here's where I see a lot of mistakes, what I call mistakes, being made, because I made them too. You're worried about making the weight. You want to come right on weight if you can. And for me, that wasn't that big of a deal. It never has been. If they're a few ounces under, great, that's okay. If they're quarter pound under, that's okay. If they're a half a pound under, for me, that's okay. Some people don't like that. That's way too much for them. That's okay for them too. You start getting in 3/4 a pound, 2 pounds, like that, that's way off. You're just way off, and you did something wrong. You probably missed the weight, because what happens is the dogs will come down naturally. And what they'll do when they start coming down naturally like that is they'll start porking the food to them. That's not going to do nothing for them. It's not. If you're feeding them enough food anyways. The difference would be they come down slowly that last week, just like they did the weeks before, compared to you see a dramatic drop. You see a half a pound a day the last week or something like that. And you're trying to adjust, you know. Because that last week, that's the dry out period, and they do it naturally. They do it on their own. You can do it for them, but if you've done your conditioning right, you don't have to. But irregardless, you might have a set number of ounces of fluid that you're going to give them, whether it's water or whether it's broth. You know, anytime you're giving them broth, if you can, especially that last week, skim the fat, no salt, no nothing in it, just as pure and clean a broth as you can get them, because it has nutrients in there, has electrolytes in it, has some proteins, you know, so you really don't need the fat at that point, unless, you know, maybe you're way off weight. That might help bring them up a little bit. But if you're way off weight, you missed it way back before that. And that drying out period is where they lose the weight the last week. During the keep, the rest days is where they lose the weight during the keep. So if it's one day, you should see the weight loss that you're looking for. If it's 2 days, same thing. I just never like giving them 3 days off in a row. Now, if you like giving them 3 or 4 days off a week, some people do, you might work them a day or two, give them a day off. Or like I mentioned before, work 2 days on, 2 days off, like that. There's nothing wrong with that. Long as the routine is the same, long as the work schedule is the same, you see increases in the work, you see decreases in the weight. There's all kinds of ways to do it. And when I say rest days, if I gave my dog a rest day, every other day after they're done work, they're resting. Not messing with them, not playing with them, not checking on them too much, not taking them out to walk them out or anything like that. And on their rest day, the same thing. Total rest. They're not doing anything. I don't do nothing with them because I just want them relaxed and rested. And they get into that program where, okay, I rest. I wake up during the day, go to the bathroom, do what I do, kick back all day long. Time comes, time to work. Same thing after the rest day. I rest all day long, kick back, boom, they're raring to go after that rest day. They'll work harder for you after them rest days. They should anyways. So if your rest day or rest days, let's say the show is on Saturday, and your rest day is Friday or Thursday and Friday, on that Saturday, that's where you'll see the weight drop. Right? So conceivably, if it's done properly and I'm at that 4 pounds that I'm going to lose during the keep, let's say I have a 40-pound dog, right? On Friday night, they're at 40 and a half. So I'm going to feed them. Boom, boom, boom. Give them their last feed, right? 24 hours later, right before the show, I'm going to empty them out. That was their rest day. Plus, they're going to empty out. I should come right on 40 pounds. That's the way I looked at it. So on Friday, if I'm 40 pounds, Saturday, I'm going to be at 39 and a half. That's how you can adjust it. Now, you can give them, let's say you want them to come in at 40 pounds, but you need them at 39 and a half on Saturday because you're going to give them a cup of fluids. You're going to give them a slurry, let's say. One liquid cup of water weighs 8 ounces. There's your half pound. If you do that with food, the food in ounces, solid food, doubles per cup. So if you're giving them a cup of food, let's say, or a cup of kibble, right, before a show, that's 16 ounces. It's not 8 ounces. The liquid is 8 ounces. So that's how you kind of adjust it. But like I said, where I see people, the weight is fluctuating. It's acting funny. They don't think it's gonna come off, so they cut back on food, or they don't allow them to have any fluids at all. Or if they're too light, they're porking the food to them. When you do that, what'll happen? They're still going to come down naturally, but you're either taking too much moisture away. So now you have a dehydrated dog. If you're cutting back the food, they would have come down naturally to the weight, but since you cut back the food, now they're under again. That's where people have the biggest mistake. You start messing with them. They'll give them too much food or not enough food. They'll give them too much moisture or not enough moisture. They'll start taking supplements away, and or they'll give them injectables or different things that the dog never had. They're not accustomed to it. That's why I mentioned whatever you're giving them in the keep, make sure they're used to it. Don't introduce something that they're not accustomed to, that they haven't had before, or they haven't had routinely and regularly before. Don't listen to all these people telling you this and that, and I do this and that. If you're going to do that, listen to other people, and you're going to try different things. Do it way before you put a dog in a keep. Don't do it during the keep. Don't change up during the keep. Don't adjust the last week during a keep. You'll mess them up for sure. And it could throw them off, and then anything can happen. So this is why and I've seen this especially with people that travel long distances, they have a mark that they're going to be overweight. And I'm talking, let's say, over 500 miles, over 1,000 miles, over 1,500, 2,000 miles. That weight that they leave their home from is anywhere from 1.5 to 2 pounds over. Because during the travel, and depending on how they feed the last day, the dogs come boom, right on weight. If you're closer to home, then they don't need to be that heavy. I've driven up to 9 hours. I mentioned that. 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours. The longest I went was 9 hours a couple of times. I didn't have my dogs way overweight. I didn't have them a pound or 2 pounds overweight. I did the same thing as I had done previously, even going that distance. And I didn't get there the day before, and I didn't, I got there a couple hours, drove the 9 hours, got there a couple hours before the show, let them settle down, give them their last whatever, empty them out, I'm right on weight. So that's just, for me, that was just the program that they were on. Since they were used to traveling, since the traveling itself didn't make them nervous or make them throw up or have the runs or anything like that, they just dropped the weight naturally like they normally do, and we're good to go. And if I was a little bit under, I knew I was going to be under a little bit before I even left the house. And I was okay with that. And here's some of the things I've seen with people that are trying to adjust the last week or even the last couple of days or even the last days, Their urine is too dark. Their stool is runny, sometimes bloody. Their stool is discolored, green or yellow or something. Now, I don't know what it is they did to make that happen. They would have had to tell me, and people don't share that information. They're not going to admit it. And they're just left to their own to figure it out. But the preventative thing, again, is, hey, that should have never happened. They shouldn't have had those problems. So I don't know if it just popped up when they got there, or if they had it before they left for the show, or even noticed it or not. But I know it's bad. So, what people ask me all the time, what is a good weight for a dog? And admittedly, in the past, people would tell me, hey, schoolboy, you match your dogs heavy. Okay. My attitude was, okay, I match them a little bit heavy. I want them strong. I want them to have as much mouth as they can. They should still be able to go distance. They should be able to be fast still. And depending on the length of the show, my dog's not going to lose that much weight during the show. So my attitude was, I may be the smaller dog when it starts, but I'm going to be the bigger dog when it's over. Because they're too dehydrated. They're too thinned out before they stepped across that wall. And by the time they were finished, all they had was a bag of bones. And it's difficult to save your dog when they're that low, that dehydrated, in shock. Right? So I'm going to show a picture here. And this picture circulates. It's Mr. Rowdy. And this is basically, let's see if you can see this. It's kind of hard to see and kind of hard to get an accurate look. This picture's kind of blurred. But just looking at him there, you can't see, but there's the sinew on his, his ribs are kind of showing, There's the muscle on his jaw is protruding. It's kind of hard in this picture. If you see the original, you would see what I'm talking about. So this is him, 2 pounds overweight. He still has to lose 2 pounds. Now, depending on how you see that picture, you could say, he could do that easy, which he could have. But you take 2 pounds off that dog, for me, he was fine. He was perfect, right? Somebody say I could take 3 pounds or 4 pounds. That's too much. So the only way to know is to get out there and do it. Is to condition your dogs, see them in some activity that shows you where they're at. Now, his third match, I mentioned this before too. He had 2 broken legs, all the flesh, this and that. He was in shock. He was unconscious. But here's something about my dog, because of the way they were raised and the way they were fed and all the exercise and love and care and all that stuff. Clean living quarters, all that. Fresh water, all that stuff. They got him hooked up, got all the stuff in him. We went back to our friend's house where we were staying the night. Angie stayed with them. They slept all night. When he got up the next morning, when he woke up the next morning, or whatever time during the night they woke up, it was like nothing happened. He pulled his IV out. He was rip-roaring, ready to go. Now that's after 2 hours and 31 minutes, flirting with death, being in shock, being down. And he had shown things like that even after his first win, where he was cut on his muzzle and his stifle. Right after the show was over and he won, he's jumping all up and down off his house. He was fine. Same thing with Bill. He went an hour 31 his first show. It took him an hour. We put him in our bedroom. It took him an hour after that to settle down. He was running the walls looking for a dog. We had to crate him. He was banging on the crate and trying to get out. Just would not settle down. My son had to go in there and be with him to settle him down. It's okay, calm down. I'm here. It's all right. All that. And that is just the point I'm making, is that's the quality of the dog, the quality of the conditioning, the feed, the raising, all that stuff. Because afterwards is where it matters. Afterwards is where you're going to see a high mortality rate or a low one. Hopefully you're on the low end. Your dogs don't expire. They don't go in too much shock. They don't lose too many fluids. And they get to a point where they can be saved because of their health, because of their conditioning, because of their recuperative powers, because of their durability and constitution. All those factors play into it. So that last week, I would suggest, if you have your keep set, how you're going to do it, how it's going to go, run it that way. Don't change it. Don't adjust too much as far as giving them something or taking something away or adding something that they're not accustomed to. Watch and see if they come down to weight naturally and they hit the mark. And if they're a little bit off, that's okay. And this is what I advise people in the past, back in the day. If you're overweight and you know you're going to be overweight, just accept it. Maybe by some chance you'll make that weight. But if you're overweight, don't go out there and walk your dog for 2 or 4 hours trying to make weight. You're not doing them any justice by doing that. And I've seen guys do that. Half hour running them on a meal, or half hour, 2 hours, 3 hour walk them, trying to pull that weight off. Try and pull that weight off. Don't do that. Let them come in how they come in. If it's over and your opponent didn't want to do that, this is me speaking to them in the past. If he don't want to do it, don't do it. Pay your forfeit and get on. If he'll still do it, you pay the forfeit, make a new bet, and do it that way. But don't try to adjust the last day, the last few hours. If you're way overweight, you knew you were way overweight a week before, 2 weeks before. So you're either doing it on purpose or you just don't have the experience to know the difference. You don't have your feed right. You don't have your keep right. There's no way you're going to be, for experienced guys, there's no way you're going to be that much overweight by accident. It's on purpose. So the other person has to take that into account. I've done that where I don't care if he's over. That's all right. It's not too much. I don't give it. I've done it where it's worked against me. I should have not done it. So that's a learning process too. And all this can be applied even today in legal sports or hunting, whatever you want. In the weight pool, how much weight do you want your dog to be? Do you want them a little heavy because it's a weight pool? Do you want them as thin as they can be because it's a treadmill race? The wall climb, how do you condition them for that? So all that plays a factor. Their coat should be shiny. They should have a lot of spirit. They should feel good. They should empty on time. There's always little mishaps. There's always things going to happen. Sometimes dogs won't empty. They're too worked up. They're too amped up. They're too peaked. They will not empty. There's ways to get them to do it. If they still don't, you just have to accept it. But don't do too much trying to get them down to that weight where they should have been anyways. These are preventative maintenance factors. Maybe certain dogs aren't good for traveling. Maybe certain dogs are just good for being local, nearby. So that last week is the hardest part, I think, for a lot of people, because you're on your nerves, you're worried about it, or thinking about it, or you're high strung yourself. If you're so confident and so amped, you can make mistakes that way too. Do things you shouldn't have done. You got to remain as calm and think what's best for you, what's best for your dog, what's the best scenario. What if this happens? What am I going to do? But if you have them on a routine, that just helps you get it done a lot easier. And the routine can factor in whether you were close to home or whether you're traveling or whatever. So these are some of that's the main thing I see. Like people ask, well, how much water do you give them? I didn't give them no water. I had a routine where I put a cup of water, liquid in their food. Sometimes water, sometimes chicken broth. That clean chicken broth. I put that in their food anyways, and that was mostly because, and I put it warm, that helped break down the kibble. It makes it softer where they digest it faster. Because believe me, I've had dogs that I competed with, feeding them 24 hours out when I didn't know what the hell I was doing and the type of kibble I was using, where they puked up whole pieces of kibble after the show. They're supposed to be empty. And this is after the dog emptying out. He still had solid foods in his belly that he hadn't digested. So that's one of the reasons I put the liquid in the food if I'm using kibble. If you're feeding raw or cooked whole foods and no kibble, you probably don't have to do that. That food has moisture in it anyways, and if you're leaving the water out there for your dog to drink whenever he wants, he's going to drink water when he wants it, and if he don't want it, he's not going to drink it. So even during that last week when they're coming up to peak, when they're peaking out, if you're feeding them raw or cooked whole foods and no kibble or very little kibble, they have plenty of moisture. They have plenty of moisture because everything has moisture in it. Whether you're using protein, animal protein and animal fat and vegetables and greens and whatever people give, fruits and some people give honey and all kinds of stuff. All of that has moisture in it. So the best way to, well, how much does this have and how much does that have? Feed them. Feed them. And whatever moisture is in that food, they'll piss it out later. They're not going to retain it. So if you were to give them a soaking piece of raw meat that's wet compared to one that's dried, maybe you put it in the refrigerator and it's dried out, the cold makes it dry out. That soaking piece of meat that's wet is just water. They'll piss it out. They're not going to retain that. So even if you're feeding that way, and it gets to the end of the keep, those last 2 or 3 days of that rest, they're going to dry themselves out. They're going to piss it and shit it all out, and they're not going to retain all this moisture, and they're going to come down to weight. That's the idea of, coming down to a particular weight. It doesn't make the animal weak because all you're getting rid of is moisture. So that dispels some things, from my own experience. Other people have their own experience, may disagree with some. That's the beauty of having conversations and giving experiences, Again, this was my way of doing it. But so those are some of the things. That's the main thing I see that people have problems during the keep is the last week. So that's the reason for this video. Feel free to comment. And thanks again for your support. We're going to hit you up after the first of the year. Me and School Baby, we're going to go live. We're going to start doing that and have regular shows. And I'll try and have some guests, and we'll just take it like that. But again, thanks everybody for your support.